Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of EOXS's Stories on Steel. This is a steel industry podcast featuring the big names of the business and the advice/stories they've accrued over their years as insiders. Steel has been a vital component in American life for well over a century, and the men and women who've helped it flourish are a diverse group of innovators full of interesting tales. We hope to share some of said tales here with you today. Thanks again to EOXS for providing this platform. In addition to this show, they are bringing businesses online by providing a standardized digital workspace for all your steel-related needs. Today, we are pleased to welcome the Vice President of Sales at American Consolidated Industries, Mr. Timothy Quinn. Tim, welcome to the EOXS podcast. How are you doing today, sir?
Well, Kevin, thank you very much for the invitation to be on the show, and doing well, and really glad to be here.
I know that we were talking a little bit beforehand about some of our different sports opinions, but I'd also love to know, you're coming to us from Cleveland. We really appreciate it. And we like to get a little bit of knowledge of the current goings on and wherever we're talking to our guests from. So what's the weather like in Cleveland so far?
Well, it's that adage that if you wait 15 minutes, that it will change. Right now, it's about 45 and rainy.
Oh boy.
Yesterday it was 60 and sunny, and it wouldn't surprise me if we got a little bit of snow this weekend.
Just for everybody wondering, we're currently recording this on the 18th of March, and I'm pretty sure it was 65 and sunny everywhere on the planet yesterday. It was absolutely gorgeous.
Irish eyes were smiling.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's good that we got a day. It's good that our day was a little bit bigger and brighter than it should have been, maybe. But that's another tangent we could go on, and we're here to talk about the steel industry and your place in it. We have a ton of topics to cover, but something we like to do with everybody is, what is your steel story? How did you find your way into the business?
Pretty interesting, but it's one of those, literally, I was almost born to be in the steel industry. I have a background where my mother's side is from the Ohio Valley, and I had grandfather and family members that worked in steel mills and also in the railroad industry. And then my father's side was from Cleveland, and that side of the family is, more blue collar, machinists, tooling. My father was a carpenter by trade right out of high school. So again, it was this blue collar blood that was in the family, and I gave it a whirl. I tried the tech sector, as my first job, and worked for an IBM business partner, and was thinking, okay, this is going to be great. It was 1995, and the big crisis was Y2K, and the world was going to end unless computers were going to save it. And actually, they were going to be the responsibility for dragging it down too. But I really thought that was going to be my path. And I had a recruiter reach out to me after just a couple of years, and I ended up just taking this interview to go see a local company here in Cleveland, Ohio. And I walked into this place, and I didn't really know much about steel. And when I saw the warehouse filled with all of these coils, I figured this has got to be at least a year's worth of product for maybe the state of Ohio. And come to understand, it was probably about a week's worth of steel. And I don't know, there's just something about that first experience where I was like, I got to be a part of this. And the rest is kind of history.
So I feel like we've had a decent split among people who sort of miraculously found their way into the industry through happenstance and or were born into it. It sounds like you have elements of both of that in your journey. Did you have any other, like when you were developing into a young man, did you have any other aspirations, like specifically, that you thought you were going to go into?
Well, when I was younger, I was there were two things I had a passion for. One of them was caddying, and the other was I was a speed skater. So,
Really?
I had this combination, and they kind of worked hand in hand when you live in Cleveland, because in the winter you can't be outside caddying, and in the summer you're not going to do much speed skating. So they were both, but they both had a lot of the same characteristics, and so many things that I learned from those experiences, as far as goal setting and discipline and being organized, and just working hard more than anything. And it was, those were really the foundations for what led me down uh, my career path later in life. But just awesome lessons that come from both of those. And on the caddy side, I mean, what better opportunity can you have than walking around, being outside, and you have these businessmen that, when you realize they're working, but they're golfing, they're probably having a couple beers, and it just looked like a lot of fun. And I guess that made me want to be a salesperson for the rest of my life.
My dad spent a lot of years in the financial sector with a bunch of different companies, and often he'd be asked to fill out uh, or like focus on recruiting. And the two biggest things he said he always looked for were athletes and bartenders, just because like the between those two you get the all the necessary life experiences. He would always say, and so I feel like caddy and speed skater. That's pretty close.
Uh, I mean, it sounds like the name of a weird book, but
Hey, I
it
mean,
was kind of a formula for me.
you ever gotta write your memoirs one day? I feel like that's just you're serving yourself up an easy home run there with the title.
Oh man.
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting origin point. Further extrapolating, what exactly drew you to sales in particular?
Uh, I think originally it was that whole concept that it looks like you can have a lot of fun doing this. I'll tell you something. I think that in the absence of sports, and a lot of the things that come from the element of competition, and the anxiety, and celebrating wins and learning from defeats, sales and sports are so similar. And I mean, when you really look at the way that they formulate together, it both starts with an end goal that's probably a lofty goal. And you put that goal down and you put it in front of you, and it's what you really want to chase. And you start to realize that I'm only going to get there. I can't get there right away. I'm going to get there through attaining a series of shorter term goals, and achieving those shorter term goals, and realizing that it is part of a process, and it's something that along the way there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows, and you just grind it out. But really, I think the element of competition that comes with sales, and wanting to be rewarded for the fruits of your labor, it's a pretty cool thing.
I think that with regards to the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, certainly not just this industry, but the entire world got a really good reminder of that fact over the past year. And it will never not be an important question to ask on this show. But how has COVID, how is threading the needle of this pandemic been for you?
I would say it's definitely been probably the best learning experience, business wise, that I've ever had, that our company's ever had. Uh, but it was one of those things where at the beginning, everything, it was all so new, and you didn't really know what to expect. You didn't know how to understand, what lied ahead. And specifically to steel, when you look at what happened, I mean, it was an immediate shutdown of manufacturing, and it shut down the automotive sector, it shut down the furniture sector, it shut down the appliance sector. And so that initial reaction caused a series of other reactions. And one of those was the idling of a lot of steel capacity. Because if you look back about this time last year, we were operating around 82% capacity utilization rate, and that dropped all the way down to about 51, 52%. And at that point, it was, what are we going to do? Because we still have to understand we've got a business to operate. We still have to be selling something. But with the uncertainty of forward demand, it was a daunting task to start to align an inventory and to decide how you were going to just take any type of approach moving forward.
Well, still, I know I don't have exact numbers to reference, but maintaining above 50% operation capacity, that sounds fairly impressive given the circumstances. Was achieving or maintaining that number difficult in the beginning?
It was extremely difficult. And I think if you look back at the early part of 2020 or the initiation of COVID, uh, you did see a lot of people. You started to realize who understood their business. You understood who had relationships within their business, and not just their business, but within the industry. Because one of the things, and it's the beauty and the beast about steel, is steel is so competitive, and it's not necessarily an industry where people look out for one another as they do in other industries. And it does get so competitive, but it was the first time where I saw like people actually in the industry want to help one another, because there really was a concern about the long-term sustainability of not just one another's businesses, but literally the industry, and specifically the steel industry in the US.
Was that seems a bit alarmist just considering how old of an industry it is, but was that was a real fear that we could be seeing a dramatic shift in the way steel is done in the United States?
Well, it's definitely, it became a survival of the fittest campaign. But if you look at the industry itself, I mean, there's not a lot of players left. And so we really couldn't afford to have one of the main players go out. I mean, if you just go back over the last 20 years and look at the landscape of the steel industry, it's massively different. I mean, you probably had 25 steel mills back in 2020 in the US that were pumping out a lot of tons. I mean, you had the likes of Bethlehem Steel, LTV Steel, Weirton Steel, Inland, Wheeling Pittsburgh, National, um, Rouge, Severstal. I mean, there were so many players, and it was a little bit too fragmented at the time. And then if you look at what happened, a gentleman by the name of Wilbur Ross came into the game, who back in 2001 to 2004, you may not have known too much about him, uh, but he consolidated the industry with his acquisition of a lot of those mills I just talked about, and formed the International Steel Group, and then eventually would sell off those assets to Lakshmi Mittal. But it was the beginning of a massive change, and a change that is actually having its biggest impact, today.
What like do how does how does viewing that type of consolidation and that type of changing of the guard feel for you who's been in the industry quite a while?
It's bittersweet. I mean, to think that, you know, Bethlehem Steel Sparrows Point, which at one time had a furnace they called the Beast to the East, no longer exists. It's pretty sad. But then at the same time, to think that, this month actually marks 120 years since Andrew Carnegie sold his Carnegie Steel to J.P. Morgan, and who founded U.S. Steel. So you see somebody like that, that you hear that story, and it's a it's a pretty kick-ass thing that we're 120 years later, and they're still, not only do they exist, and not only have they weathered some of the harsh storms through the steel, the steel winters, but they're now actually in expansion mode, and they've had an acquisition of their own recently, and a company who's now trying to think differently to survive, because they've always been a fully integrated mill, and now with that acquisition of Big River, they're getting themselves into a necessary operation with a mini mill or an EAF.
It's sort of a Game of Thrones situation, all these factions like changing and evolving over time. And we could definitely talk about the landscape of the steel industry. But before we go any further, I'd want to talk a little bit about American Consolidated and your role within the company. Can you tell us a little bit about both of those two things, if you would?
Absolutely. American Consolidated Industries is the parent company of four uh, other companies, which is Monarch Steel of Alabama, Parthenon Tube, and Southeast Tube. And what we do is we're labeled on the Monarch side a steel service center, and then a tuber on the other side of the business. But we're providing solutions to customers in 9 different verticals, from automotive to construction, to lawn and garden, to appliance, a little bit even into energy. And you know, the company started out traditionally as a steel service center, but as we try to become more than as we try and increase value to our customer base, the acquisitions on the tubing side have helped us further down, or place ourselves further down the supply chain with some key manufacturers in this country. And you hear the term vertical integration used quite a bit now. And I think that it's something that it's going to be difficult to survive just as a steel service center, no different than was difficult for U.S. Steel to survive just solely as a integrated steel maker.
Okay, and now if we could talk a little bit more about your role as VP of Sales.
Sure. I'm responsible for the commercial responsibilities for all four companies. I have built a team over the last 3 years where we have a vice president of business development at each location, and each one of those VPs are responsible for building out a sales plan. We are a company, we're a company that's dedicated to growth, but we're also dedicated to a sustainable growth, because you can, and it's happened, you can grow too fast and have some hiccups. But I can tell you from a overall capability standpoint, on the steel side, we have 4 slitters, we have a multi-blanking line, we have a cut to length line. We focus on flat rolled products, hot rolled, pickled, cold rolled, galvanized, and then have the processing capabilities and the locations. By the way, I mean, we're very strategically located, and again, it does allow us to be very cost competitive. I mean, our cost structure is amazing, and then when you mix in the tubing side of it, what better supply chain can you have for a tubing operation than to have your own steel service center? But not only a steel service center, but steel service centers that are located in Cleveland, in close proximity to the new Cleveland Cliffs, and right on the campus in Decatur, where we are located right next door to Nucor.
Okay, you talked a little bit about maintaining sustainable growth and that the dangers exist when a company grows too quickly, because that can be detrimental. What are some of the factors that go into maintaining that sustainability?
Well, I think number one is making sure that you are building the right relationships on the supply side in order to support the growth that you're going to have. And I would point to today's market as a perfect example. I mean, it's tough for anybody to grow today. because there's just not a lot of steel excess capacity or steel availability. But on the front side, you have to establish those relationships, and it's tough sometimes because this market tends to become a game of rock'em sock'em robots. And maybe I'm showing my age by talking about that game, but you had those fists up, and it was always like, hey, when the mills had the upper hand, they threw the uppercut and they hit you in the jaw. And then when market prices went down and the mills didn't have orders, the manufacturing sector and the service center smelled blood, and they'd come in with that gut punch. And I think that way can work, but to me, um, I'm a lover, not a fighter, I guess. I'd rather find a way for us all to come up with that proverbial win-win scenario, and be able to navigate all of the waters together. Not just when it's one-sided, good for one, and next market it's good for the other guy. We all got to get our share, and it's in all of our best interest that we all survive.
Do you think that that is a widely held belief in the industry, or are you sort of a maverick for maintaining that idea?
I think the industry does need a little bit of a push to care about each other. I do feel that um, that steel is such an important part of the U.S., not just the history and the present, but of the future. And it's brought so many things together. I mean, people ask me all the time, and I've got friends in tech and medical and farm, and and they're asking me, well, why would you stay in the steel industry? What do you what's steel going to do? And I try to be polite in my response, because my head wants to blow off, and I play rock'em sock'em robots
It's
real
it's
life with
it's the
them.
most recyclable material. It's one of the most recyclable materials we have. Like, what
That
do you
is
mean? What am
awesome. That is awesome that you say that, because at the highest level, that is so true. I mean, it's responsible for our safety. I mean, it's in the cars we drive. It's in the wheels that hold the car. It's inside the concrete in the road that we drive on. It's in the buses that take our kids to school, and the buildings that we build and trust that we can go up 50 floors and we're going to be okay. I mean, it literally is the foundation of everything that this country was built upon. And to diminish it, and to treat it wrong, and not just the industry. I mean, I think our industry needs to also sometimes have a little bit more respect for the product, because I hear so many people, and this is one of the things that drives me craziest. And my old employer, he shares the same vision. Steel is not a commodity. It is not a commodity. It is a highly engineered, highly sophisticated product that people have put their lifetime, their blood, sweat, and tears into making. And some people will say, well, my steel is the same as somebody else's steel, and you don't have to worry about the quality of the steel. Well, I question that too. I think that you see some of the issues that do take place out there, Flint, Michigan, or with some of the airplanes, and one of the steel mills over in Japan, and these are real concerns. You see HVAC and coating weights misrepresented on galvanized products, and I mean, there's a purpose. There's a purpose for what we engineer and what we call out for specs in this industry. But I think more than anything, our job in this industry needs to be to decommoditize steel, and to promote it as something that is special, and it is responsible for everything that surrounds us every day. And like you said, it's pretty cool that it is the most recycled product on the face of this earth. And at the end of the day, this earth is all we got.
It's steel, and then it's right behind bad jokes for most recycled things we have on Earth. But
I hope I haven't
so
said too many of those.
it sounds like, no, all yours are zingers, I would imagine. So it sounds like part of your desire is in how steel is marketed and how the industry is marketed to the general public, and you want to change some of that. Do you have any immediate ways that you think that the industry could be marketed better?
You're doing a hell of a job, by the way, because that is how I feel. That is how I feel. I'm very passionate about this industry, but to me, one of the biggest challenges that this industry faces, and it's got to address this very soon, is that we need to close the generational gap. I mean, if you look at the majority of this industry, I mean, it is filled with baby boomers and Gen Xers. And now, so it's somehow, some way, we've got to diversify that, because you're talking about a workforce where the millennials are the largest demographic in the U.S. workforce, yet they're probably the smallest in the steel sector. And so to me, it's not just. I think it's obvious that we have to do that. Part of what comes with that, though, is how do we do it? And I know I got pictures of Kiss in the background, but I'm probably going to use a Justin Timberlake song here, which they'd be beat me over the head if they heard me say that.
I won't
But
tell them.
but Steel's got to find a way to bring sexy back. I mean, there's got to be, we've got to do something as an industry to promote steel, and to not let it be, one, commoditized, and two, just, it can't be looked at this dark, dingy, cold, hell-like environment where sparks are flying and rats are running around, and it looks like the last scene of one of the Star Wars movies. I mean,
Well, actually, hang on. You might want to ease into that. Like, say, oh wait, this is Mustafar. We're on. We're
okay.
on Tatooine. It's funny that you say that, though, because when I truly do think about the steel industry, my mind, I'm aware of how much it's advanced, but my mind immediately just goes to a movie like Rudy, where like every time he has to go back to the factory and the plant, it's just like, oh, I got to get out of here. I got to go play football at Notre Dame. And
Right.
I do think that is part of the problem, just because it can be daunting. It's a daunting environment. And it's
Sure.
a lot of aspects of it seem to have remained unchanged for a very long period of time. Um, do you think that the digital space holds some sort of avenue for how you could market steel better? Like, do you think that utilizing different platforms potentially? Just because I know I rarely see ads for um as a millennial, I rarely see ads for steel companies and recruitment centers on the platforms that I'm usually on.
Sure. Well, I think it goes without saying that we have to evolve as an industry, and digitalization and technology, they will definitely be a component of this industry in the future. I think right now the industry, you've got EOXS, you've got Felix, you've got you've got Rebus International, companies that are trying to break the mold and to push it into that direction. And I think they're all on to something right now. I grew up and I loved being able to file share. And I loved being able to go onto Napster or ShareBear and rip off songs and get them for free. But when you
Wow,
think of
bragging a steel VP bragging about how cool Napster was.
it, well, it was cool.
I'm sorry, I need a minute, because truly I've done a lot of podcasts in my day, not just for steel, but for other avenues. Never thought I'd hear that.
Oh man. Well, I'll tell you what. I got a room full of about 150 CDs that I don't know what the hell to do with, except make cool drink coasters around my house. But
You
you
got
know,
to throw them up on LimeWire, like burn them onto LimeWire so I can
that was another
download
good. Yeah,
them.
that was another good one.
Oh
It
wait, no, I
was.
didn't download a song. I downloaded 100 viruses. What? Oh boy.
Well,
But
there's a learning curve too. But I
oh,
but I mean,
definitely.
look at the way, I think that the industry, it will happen. I still think it's a little ways away because they've got to figure some things out. But it's no different than the hotel industry or the airline industry. You know, the ability to have access to others' inventory and be able to play matchmaker without the risks of buying into speculative tons and putting steel on the ground with extended lead times in the hopes that you're going to have a customer that will be able to not only buy it, but that the market sustained itself long enough and you could be able to sell it and make money. I mean, there's something there. There's no doubt that there's something there. It's just a matter of, how do we get there again in an industry that's doesn't have a lot of it's still caught in its old ways. And don't get me wrong, there's a massive amount of brilliant people in this business. There's a massive amount of forward thinkers and innovators. Innovation isn't just technology. Innovation is ideas, and innovation is steel making, practices, and a lot of other things. But right now, that to me, and I'm actually reaching out to all three of those companies that I mentioned and trying to find out, okay, my question is not just, let's just not do a tutorial and teach us how to use your platform, but internally we've got to figure out how and when, or I'm sorry, why and when. We'll figure out the how and how to navigate the site and go in and put your favorites in there or create RFQs. But for us, it's really attractive to be able to think that if we on the sales side develop the relationships with customers and we do our job in profiling those customers and understanding what it is that they need and when they need it and how they want to buy it, well, then we can play matchmaker. I can grab somebody else's 14 gauge CSB pickled coils in Chicago and move them to somebody that I know down in Kentucky, and I can make money doing it. And I didn't have the physical inventory space or the cash outlay, and I eliminated a lot of risk. So I
So
think there's something.
so utilize some of a strategy not unlike utilizing big data, like the millions of inputs people make every day for free on social media and online. Like that data is there and is mined by companies for targeted advertisements, specialized needs, building profiles, like you said. And I think that is one of those steps that the industry could definitely be taking. I'll never forget the first time I had someone on here and say they still use their fax machine, and I was just like, oof, wow.
Well. Here's a funny story to go with that. Is we had a guy that was pulling up an order or a customer profile, and it said P, and then it had the number, and then it said F, and it had the number. And he said, what's P and F on this? What's the difference? Which number should I call? And I said, well, P's for phone, and F is for phone. So there's that dad joke. Or
There we go. You had one.
I had to throw it out there. But it is kind of funny that somebody that has a job in our organization, and it's not really funny, and I don't hold this against them in any way, shape, or form, but yeah, that stuff is phased out. And if people are still living in that world, they got to wake up or they're not going to survive.
Well, I mean, when the industry reinforces that, is there a incentive to change?
Well, there's some saying out there, uh, you could probably finish it for me, but something along the lines of, those that resist to adapt to change, usually go extinct.
Yeah.
I think that the industry has made it difficult, and trust me, I mean, I'm in the middle of it. I see it day in and day out. And, but listen, there is still a great way to sell and have a red wine and a ribeye. I love that. Don't get me wrong. Relationships and experiences are always going to trump everything that you do in the sales world. I mean, you are, especially in steel, we're talking big numbers. We're talking big contracts. We're talking, you know, trust. A lot of trust goes into the people that you buy from. But, now you have to be more in tune with not just the market and the market conditions, which I personally think is one of the highest values you can create for a steel buyer or a company that is purchasing your steel. But analytics is driving a lot of what we're doing too. And, just having visibility into so many components. And that's where I think we're starting to catch up with some things. But you'd be surprised how many people still run businesses on spreadsheets in this industry.
We were just talking a little bit about the future. You were giving your thoughts on where you think the industry's going. And I know we don't want to take too much of your time, but we would love to know how you think steel is going to be traded, next year, next 5 years, maybe up to 2030, if you can think that far.
Whew. It is a long time to think about, especially considering everything happened in today's market, because I can't even tell you what's going to happen next month. But no, I get it. I think that, again, you're going to see people move more into a technology-based arena, more customer portals, more access to system sharing. I do think, again, I think, this company and the other players in the market are going to figure some things out on how to, on how to succeed. It's just, again, what we're dealing with is you're trying to take a very traditional business and crack it and disrupt it, and it will happen. I know it will happen. To me, though, it's fighting it. And I wish the industry didn't fight it so hard, because I think when we see how efficiently it will allow us to operate, and when people can really see how it can mitigate a lot of risks, I mean, it's just going to be it's going to be a game changer. It's hard to change people right now that have been set in their ways for so long, because it's funny. I've been in this business a little over 25 years, and I still walk into rooms of 50 people, and I'm one of the least tenured people in the industry. It's wild.
I mean, when we were talking about JP Morgan and Carnegie, that's the length of this industry, and it goes even further back than that, and like different metals
Right.
being mined in antiquity and medieval times. It's crazy. It's crazy to think about the kind of mantle you're inheriting. Do you think that sort of history is what makes some people hesitant to change things?
It could be.
Yeah.
I do think, I still think that one of the fundamental principles has to be that it's an industry that's really looking out for each other. And, let me throw two things at you. I grew up watching a lot of TV. I didn't play a lot of video games, but when I had downtime at the house, I was watching TV, and I remember those commercials, milk does a body good, pork, the other white meat, beef, it's what's for dinner. These are whole industries that were marketing a product, not a specific company, not a specific type, but they were just, they were for the common good of everyone. And I look at some things I'm starting to see today that are very promising, is that a lot of manufacturing trade organizations, especially, are really trying to pump awareness about and get into schools and talk about manufacturing jobs and careers. Because one, there's an absolute need to do it, because we talk about reshoring and we talk about doing things to create, to bring manufacturing back to the US. Last year, I couldn't get enough guys to work a third shift. But sometimes I couldn't get enough guys at some places to work, a full first shift. So how are we going to bring back millions of jobs if we don't have millions of people to take them? And so I do applaud what a lot of that sector is doing. How does steel participate too?
All right, well, let's look at that for a second. You talked about bringing jobs back. I personally know a lot of people in my age range who graduated just a little bit before coronavirus, or are maybe still involved in school, unfortunately, and they have to deal with all the stuff going on. We entered or are entering a job market that's vastly different than what we thought it was going to be, and it wasn't exactly phenomenal before coronavirus. So, what types of jobs are you talking about, promoting to that group or groups like that in that rough age range? And like, what jobs are you talking about bringing back from overseas?
I, I mean, I think that we are looking at a potential, I think an inevitable, actually, resurgence of manufacturing in this country. We're seeing right now a massive disruption in deliveries and availability of products. And what we're really finding out is that the supply chains that are in place aren't as reliable as we thought. I do think that we do need to focus on trade schools and vocational schools and get people to realize that a manufacturing job in a facility running a machine or working in a steel mill is actually something that you can make a lifelong lucrative career out of. I mean, I'll tell you the one company that really has it right now is Nucor. And Nucor is really focused on, they don't just pump an hourly wage out of people or a salary at people. They demand excellence. They have an unbelievable culture, but their people make more money when they perform as A players. And everybody wins in that situation, because the company, when the mill's operating more efficiently and it's putting out tons, and it's taking care of its customers, and it's actually exceeding expectations, well, then the company makes more money, the investors make more money, and in their structure, their people make more money. And I'm talking about everybody along the entire chain, from the person that's banding the coil at the very end of that process.
That does seem like something that more people should be made aware of. But I think one problem is that there's a fear that the type of promotion that used to exist in on the floor factory and manufacturing jobs, where you can join at that level and then work your way up to a higher position in the company, not just within the factory or the mill, but in the financial sectors and the management sectors. Does that avenue still exist?
Yeah, I believe so. And I think in this industry, in this sector, where, listen, I'm not being disrespectful to anybody, but in the next 10 years, there's going to be a massive exodus of bodies in this business. I mean, it's going to come from retiring. It's going to come from passing away. I mean, we have there's so much opportunity. There's so much opportunity out there.
All right. Well, Tim, I think that is a ton more information than we were, hoping to cover, but I'm really glad we managed to cover so many different areas in this conversation. And we hope we can have you back on at some point soon. And we'll try and get more into our sports talk from before the episode next time around.
Hey, and by the way, I think it's absolutely awesome what you're doing, because we talk about awareness and we talk about pumping the message, and even seeing a younger face in the industry. It's very cool So thank you for having me on, but thank you more importantly for what you're doing.
I really appreciate that. And the Oxys, they're really willing to take chances on different types of content like this. And been a really fun journey to be a part of. But, not for a little self promotion. I'm also marketing. I graduated with my graduate degree in marketing right before quarantine. So if you guys need anyone my age, pumping up the energy around there, just let me know. I'm not far from Ohio.
Right on. Sounds good.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much for coming on. We will have to have you back on at your earliest convenience. But to all of our viewers and listeners, thank you for watching and/or listening, because this has been another insightful episode of EOXS's Stories on Steel. Thanks again to Tim for stopping by. And remember, whether galvanized or hot rolled, EOXS will provide a marketplace to take any steel business to the online sector. Thank you and good night.